I'll fix it when I upload it. Part 2. Chapter 15, Governmental Accounting. This is colleges, universities. And we're going to do some 7 questions here. The last question is going to be a series of journal entries that we will need to discuss the differences between public and then the private or for-profit colleges, okay? Before we start, I got a quick little message. This is from a guy in Texas named Douglas. So this is a message from Douglas. It's from April 15th, but it also deals with Easter, which is good. So it says, this is how it goes. Really? Really? An Easter bunny in church? Yes, it was perfect. It was a perfect Easter Sunday morning. As pastor, I presented the exciting Easter story to our worshipers. All of a sudden, I heard a ripple of laughter break out in the youth section. It spread like wildfire from row to row. I signaled my wife at the organ that I needed help. She rushed to our 12-year-old daughter's row, where she discovered a fuzzy, live baby bunny, pink nose and all. Needless to say, my sermon ended sooner than usual. After the service, our grinning daughter explained that she'd found the bunny at the park beside our house. She'd brought it to church to give it to her best friend who lives on a farm. Really? Since it was Easter, we forgave and hugged each other and agreed to forget the day the Easter bunny went to church. Truth is, the incident remains my best Easter sermon illustration. Christ rose from the dead and is ever living to bring the exciting joy of salvation to the whole world, one pew at a time. Okay, so that's from Douglas from Texas. I appreciated that message. Let's do some problems and try to get through this as quick as possible, okay? Chapter 15, end of chapter questions. There's only 7. The last one's a little lengthy. Here's the first one. Colleges and universities look to which standard-setting body for GAAP? Okay, and the answer is, the easy answer here is the long answer down there at the bottom. It depends on the type of college or university, okay? Public colleges would use GASB. Private and for-profit colleges would use FASB. Some of the NCUBO recommendations for GAAP are adopted by the FASB. Okay, so some of this will spill into the for-profits and the private colleges. So your answer there is D. Very good. Which of the following statements is prepared by both private and public colleges and universities? Okay, so the net position and net assets depends on the type of. So most of these are kind of, even though they're kind of the same thing, the names are different. The statement of net assets. I can't remember which one it's for. I can go look real quick. I got it pulled up. Nope, not this page though. Yeah. Doesn't really matter. It's got, that was one of our questions too, right? I can't remember which one's which though. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Nope. One more. Oh goodness. Well, it doesn't really matter. Let's not waste time. The one that on that list that is that they both have to do is the cash flow statement. Now, statement of net position and statement of net assets, they're similar, but it just depends on if it's private or public or private. Which also the activities one I think goes with the I think it goes with the. I think that's what you call the public ones, but I'm not positive. So we can look it up if we need to, or I say you can look it up if we need to. How about that? Okay. Statement of cash flows is done by both. Remember, for private, you can do indirect. Public, you must do direct. Private, you can do indirect or direct method. Public, you must do direct. Okay. Number 3. Which of the following is a true statement about tuition revenue in a college or university? All right. Now I've got these kind of pulled up. If I can find this, let's see if I can find it quickly. Right. I don't want to waste much time. Not here. It's on the next screen. I've got it in a different color. Here we go. Oh, there's what I was looking for there. It's net assets for private and then net position for public. All right. Here it is in the green, okay? So this is me kind of answering that question. It was a pretty good question. I wanted to make sure I, look at all the things here. It says scholarships should always be reported as expenses. That's our first answer. Well, let's look and see. Up here it says gross tuitions and fees should be recorded as revenue, even though some will be offset by scholarships, waivers, scholarships, and fellowships. To recognize offsets of tuitions and fees, such as scholarships, we will use a discount and allowance accounts are used. Okay, so right there, that proves that first one wrong. They're not recorded as expenses. They're recorded either as discounts and allowances. Okay. Tuition receivable estimated to be uncollectible should be reported as an operating expense. Okay, and that's down here. I think they just changed the words here. Tuition waivers as a part of compensation is an expense. Okay, the rest is all contra revenue type of discount accounts. Okay, so that proves that one wrong. Obviously, that means the last one cannot be correct. And what it says here is refunds should be reported as deductions from gross revenue. In other words, like a direct credit to the revenue account. You see it down here, the last thing. Refunds of tuition or fees are charged directly against the revenue account, okay? And so that's why that one's the true one. Very good. Okay, keep moving. Number 4. All right, here we go. A university expended $2.4 million on a new parking facility. The transaction was reported as an investing activity in its direct method statement of cash flows. What type of university prepared the statement of cash flows? Okay. I did say that you must do the direct method with public schools, okay, public colleges. But you can also do it with private and for-profit. Okay, so this right here is not giving you the answer. Oh, it must be public. Okay, that's not right. What I had to do to figure it out, is go look at the statements. Okay, just to remember. Remember, the public ones will be very similar to the cash flow statements we did in Chapter 7, which is the proprietary funds. So, and they've got examples in the book too. So here's the first one down here. All right. So if it was a okay. So just to reiterate here, it says here that Midwest is a hypothetical public university. So Midwest is public. And then the other one, what was it called? Something college. Valley College is our hypothetical private college, okay? We'll just stop right there. Okay? So when we look at Midwest down here, here's the net position. Here's the changes in net position. But here's the cash flow statement. See, so now we get to where it looks like the proprietary funds, where it's not quite what we were used to from back in Principles 2, where it would be just cash flows for investing, where we'd have purchase of fixed assets. Okay? Instead, it breaks it down into financing, where you got the capital financing and you got the non-capital financing. So if it were a public college, it wouldn't be in the investing section. Instead, you'll see it right here, purchase of capital assets like this sidewalk would be in the cash flows from capital and related financing activities. All right. Now let's go find the private one just to have a look. Here's the Valley College statement of cash flows, and you see under the investing activities, okay, this is actually done in the indirect method, it doesn't really matter, but the cash flows from investing activities, here's where that purchases the PP&E, okay, so it would be somewhere in this is where the that sidewalk or that new street would go, okay, so the answer to this question, what type of statement for it to be in the investing activities would have to be either for-profit or private, so it's going to be this combined one down at the bottom. Oh, there we go. 5. Last year, Zealot College showed positive revenue over expenses number for the first time in several years. The college is funded with contributions, grants, and 2 government appropriations. Okay, that's kind of like appropriations means it must be public, right? Did I just answer the question? I think I just did. And tuition and fees. Zealot College is most likely what type of college? Because of the government appropriations, then this must be a public college. And it's going to be the bottom one, right? Because primarily the school is for the most part is based off of tuition and fees coming in. So I think the bottom one should be the most correct answer. Public university engaged primarily in governmental activities. I would say no. That's like services to the citizens. Down here, we're talking about services to the students in exchange for tuition and fees. So that should be the right answer. Let me check. Perfect. Okay. Then we got number 6. Gresham College is it's local private. Okay, so it is private. When reviewing the college's financial reports, you would expect to see which of the following categories on its statement of assets and liabilities. Well, we got that pulled up, right? Let's go look. That's activities. This is income and revenue and expense here on the activities. So when we look up here at the financial position for our private college, what do we got here? We got unrestricted net positions. We got unrestricted net assets, restricted net assets. Let's see what we got. And here it is down here. So net assets, you see with and without donor restrictions, okay? So net assets with and without donor restrictions is obviously the answer. Beautiful. All right, that gets us to our journal entries, okay? Yay, journal entries. A bunch of them too, right? So I want to go through them kind of at the same time, if you will. I think the numbers might get off a little bit too, because you see here there's I. Is there a J2? No, there's the I. So there's one more up top and the bottom. We'll explain it when we get to it. All right, so let's start with the first one. In the current fiscal year, the university. So the top answer is A is for private. Can I highlight these? I don't know if I can or not. I cannot. Okay, so A is for private, which also would include for profit, and then down here at the bottom is for public. All right. In the current fiscal year, the university was notified by the government that next fiscal year, it would receive a $500,000 grant for wetlands research. Okay, so the first thing, for the private institution, we will want to do this as an accrual. Okay, so we want to do an accrual. So we will have a receivable of some sort, and we'll have we'll call it like revenue, some sort of revenue with restrictions, because it can only be used on wetland research, okay? So let's see if we can figure it out. So the first thing is a receivable. So we need a receivable, and it's a grant, so it must be grants receivable. I just saw it. Oh, I'm going too fast. Grants receivable sounds good. For $500,000. My numlock's not on. It is now. Okay, that's not enough zeros. It's gonna be one of those days. There we go. And now we gotta have something with donor restrictions. Contributions with donor restrictions. Endowment. I would say research, right? This is for wetlands research. Okay, and that'll be our. It's essentially a revenue type of account. Okay, but it does have restrictions. Okay, so we have to. It has to be in that restricted net asset section. And so down here, the federal government to a public university. Okay, is for the next fiscal year, and if you're in that mindset of fund accounting, but we'll only record it when it comes in. We don't want to do an accrual for it. A little more of a modified type of accrual approach is we'll record it as revenue in the fiscal period when it comes in. So for part 2 here, we will do no entry. And how am I going to word this to make the computer happy? Okay, not saying no entries, no journal entry required. Okay, and again, the grant cannot be used until next year, therefore the time requirement has not been met and recognition is deferred. Okay, that's the official reasoning why for the chapter. Very good. So, the university received an endowment. Okay, an endowment. So this will be $500,000 will be cash, right? So cash coming in. And this will be a other restrictions. So we got with donor restrictions. This will be endowment instead of research, right? So that'll be the $500,000. Okay. And now for the the public school down here, we will have the cash coming in. Okay, and it'll be the $500,000, and we're going to call this just revenues, gifts, and grants. So revenues. Hopefully you're like, whoa, hold on now. I mean, we can't spend that, right? We can't spend it. How can we just call it revenue if it's not spendable? What we'll do, and let me read the word for word here. The public colleges and universities do not recognize the restriction in the recording, but we report the $500,000 as restricted net position, not expendable. So we'll make the disclosure, or we'll show it in the kind of the net position area as a non-spendable portion. Okay, so that's how that's going to look. Let's go on to number 3. The for the fiscal year, the university recorded $2.5 million in tuition fees and revenues, and then a separate side item we're going to give some refunds. Okay, refunds, cash refunds at that. So we got to record the 2.5 is tuition and fees revenue, right? And we'll have a receivable. So we got a receivable for tuition and fees somewhere in here. There's accounts receivable, tuition and fees receivable. Accounts receivable, tuition and fees. Now, you know what? It looks like I don't understand. I don't like this, but it says that I've got the answer printed out, so I'm kind of cheating a little bit. But let me put the answer in and we'll talk about it because I don't like it. So it says here that this should be the bottom one, tuition and fees receivable, $2.5 million, right? I agree with that. I mean, obviously it gets the number. And then down here we'll do like the revenue, the tuition and fees revenue, tuition. Well, there's that. Revenue, tuition, and fees. That sounds good. Uh-oh. Again, I typed in revenue. No, I didn't. Yeah. It's down here at the bottom. I missed it. Remember, when we do the state, we got to keep thinking about with or without restrictions. Tuition and fees would be without restrictions, okay? Because that's like services and fees. So that's I actually like that one better than I was thinking with the revenues. Okay, so I do like that. But then, so this top one, tuition and fees receivable, to me, accounts receivable, tuition and fees is pretty darn close. And then down here, for the public institution, it actually wants you to use accounts receivable, tuition and fees, as opposed to using tuition and fees receivable. So, and it actually, I'll explain what it says here in a minute. 2.5, and this will be revenue, tuition, and fees, right? Yeah. So we will call it revenues for the public, which I'm fine with that. Because we don't need that with or without donor restrictions down there. Now it says down here for number 3, note that while the different account titles are used, tuition and fees accounting for private and public colleges is essentially the same name. Okay, so different account names a little bit, but ultimately it's the same thing. And now we have to do the refunds. And again, in the previous question I said, these are directly, we credit these directly to the revenue accounts. So we'll use the accounts we used up here, and they're cash refunds. Okay, so the credit will be to cash. So here we used without donor restrictions as our tuition and fees without restrictions. So we'll use that again as our debit. So tuition and fees without donor restrictions, we'll get the $325 like such, and then it'll be a cash refund. So cash, the $325. Okay. So that's pretty straightforward. The refund is pretty easy. I'm getting some messages here. Nothing important though. All right. And then we'll do it again. Now this time we'll use the revenue tuition and fees account, right? That'll be our debit. So revenue tuition fees right there, $325. Then cash, $325. Nice and easy. All right. All right, number 4. Provided tuition waivers for students with outstanding academic performance. These are scholarships. Okay? Essentially. They call them waivers. Essentially, it's a scholarship. So what we're going to use here for these scholarship type of awards is we'll use allowance accounts, like a sales discount account, if you will, like a tuition discount and allowance account. Okay, so of course we'll take it away from the receivable, right? So our credit's going to be to the receivable. So back here, you see we'll have to do our credit to tuition and fees receivable for the private college. So that's going to be our credit. So I'll put it down here, tuition, oh, I can't spell now. Tuition and fees receivable is going to get, how much is this? Is going to be what? $12,600. Okay. And we need some sort of an allowance. Tuition and fees, discounts and allowance. That sounds decent. Does it like that one? It does. Good. I like that one. Okay, that looks good. So you see we've reduced the receivable. And we put it into a discount account, which is like a contra revenue that will, offset the revenue account. All right? And then down here, okay, we got to figure out, well, what's our receivable here is accounts receivable tuition and fees, okay? That'll be our credit. Accounts receivable tuition and fees, we'll get that $12,600 credit for the scholarship type awards, the waivers. And then we'll do that. I think we'll use that same account, that allowance account. Tuition fees, discounts, and allowances. And we'll see if, let me double check on that though. Yes. Number 4. Note that except for the account title used, recording discounts and allowances is essentially the same for public and private colleges. And the account title we're talking about is for the receivables. That's in this case. Okay, very good. Like it. Right, here we go. During the year, the university constructed a new street to allow for the expansion of its students' housing efforts. The cost was $1.98 million. Okay. So the cost is cash. So that'll be the for both of these, the credit will be to cash. Let's think about here where we have really it's just kind of like both of these. We got to classify them first, right? Obviously, in this case, a street is kind of like a fence, and a sidewalk is called what? Improvements, like land improvements. So maybe we should use as our debit. Yeah, let's use land improvements. There we go. I like it. $1.98 million. Cash. Now, I would like to use that same thing down here, but I do have my notes here, and it says, note that public colleges and universities have a separate capital asset classification for infrastructure. So down here, we'll, instead of calling it is kind of the same thing, okay, we're going to call it infrastructure as opposed to land improvements. Okay. At this point, we're just kind of splitting hairs, okay? Okay. That looks good. I like both of those, other than just a slightly different name. Okay, now we're going to record the payment of expenses related to wetlands research. Okay, so this expense ties into this grant up here at number 1. So we'll have something to do a little more with our private institution. Ultimately, we have to record the expense. So it's like a research expense. Okay, research expense of $25,000. Oh, that's too many zeros. One of those days again, right? The cash that we use to pay for it is $25,000. Okay, then down here, the same thing. Okay, research expense. We're not going to call it expenditures, even though it's kind of like a proprietary type fund. Okay. We're going to put that $25,000 in here. And we're going to show the cash. Okay. Okay, now. We'll excuse me. Both of these transactions has further ramifications. Okay. The private college. Okay. With the private college, we need to remove, and you can come back here and look at it. We can't, from this with restrictions, it needs to kind of come out because the restrictions have been met. Okay? Not so much, and I think really, because we're talking about the next fiscal year, number 6 is kind of in the next year. Okay? So that $500,000 from that grant received in number 1 has been rolled into like the equity account. We're calling it net assets with restrictions, okay? And so now we need to release some of that net assets with restrictions and put it into without restrictions, okay? And so that's what's going to occur first. Remember, the net assets with restrictions would be it's an equity type of account, so it's credit balance. So to reduce it, we would do a debit to the with restrictions, okay? Now, this is going to be a little confusing. All right. With donor. All right. This one here looks good. Net assets released from restrictions with donor restrictions. Okay, the with restrictions is being removed because they've been satisfied because the wetlands research applies to the grant for wetlands research. So we'll lower it by $25,000, and we're going to put it into the without donor restrictions. Without donor restrictions, net assets released from restrictions. Without, so we're going to put it into essentially the expendable now. Now we can, that revenue that came in, we can take that $25,000 out of it to cover those expenses that we just paid, okay? Now, down here, you see there is no way to do anything with, what about the unassigned, the reserved fund balance or the non-spendable fund balance? How are we going to, I say fund balance, but really it's net position. How are we going to fix that? Okay, there's some notes here to read to you. Let me read them. It says, note that public colleges and universities often use the same expense classifications. It's a natural classification is used Hang on, this is what I'm saying. However, public colleges do not record the release of net assets from restrictions. Instead, the net position category is adjusted at year-end to reflect the appropriate account balance in restricted net position. Okay? So, we won't do it now. We'll do it later at the end of the year. We'll fix it then. All right? And that's why there's nothing else to do there. And so, let's do the last one, which is that's uncollectible, recording for uncollectible. Okay, and we'll do it down here as well. Okay, so up here for the public. All right, for public private institutions are private. We will hang on. Estimated it was recorded. Okay, so we're going to reduce revenue by 1670. Okay. And we're going to put it into an allowance for doubtful accounts. I guess it's going to offset our receivable, right? Offset to our receivable. Sure. Okay. So we're going to have our remember, this is tuition and fees, right? Tuition and fees without donor restrictions. By default, there's no restrictions there. Here's that 1670. All right. And then we're going to credit the allowance for doubtful accounts for 1670. Okay. So if you think about it, that's kind of a direct write-off, right? It really kind of is, because but instead of doing like a bad debt expense, we just took it right out of the revenue account. Okay. And then down here for H, that's not. If I were trying to do this like based on my experience, probably would have got that wrong, right? I mean, well, bad debt expense of some sort, right? But here we do a direct reduction to revenue, right? It says right here in my notes, private colleges directly adjust the revenue account for bad debts. Okay? And then down here, it says here, my second note is public colleges typically use a contra revenue. Okay? A contra revenue. So kind of like a sales discount account, but we're going to call it something like, what the wording in the book here is provisions for bad debts. So not so much a bad debt expense. It is a debit balance account, but we're going to call it like a contra revenue. So it'll be above up there where you're getting your net tuition, I guess, as opposed to down there in a bad debt expense account. And that's going to be 1670. And then the other side is going to be that allowance account. Just your contra asset for your receivables. Allowance for doubtful accounts. There we go. So there are some pretty unique differences there towards the end. Let's check these. Make sure I didn't make any errors. I might have made an error. Looks like it's complete and correct. Okay, well, good. So that's why I wanted to come in and do this. Like in theory, I could have said, okay, well, work them yourself. But some of these account tiles are really kind of difficult. So I wanted to spend the time with you guys to kind of go over these. I'm getting ready to shut it down here and post up Chapter 15 quiz. It'll be available here probably by 1 o'clock on Wednesday. And if you guys have any questions or problems with the quiz or with this, the end of chapter questions, hit me up with an email. Until then, until next week when we do our healthcare organizations, have a great weekend. God bless you, and God bless us all. Pray for those who need praying for. Obviously, a lot of people are, affected by the coronavirus. A lot of people in South Carolina are still affected by storms. Most of it's property damage, but then 9 people passed away. So we definitely want to pray for those souls as well as their family members as well. Okay, So until next week, God bless, and we'll see you next Monday or Tuesday. I'll do my Chapter 15 presentations as well. Goodbye.